Welcome to part 2 of the Crucible of Change. My name is Mark Clutie and I'm the founder of My Wealth Guys. Thank you for joining us. So what is the Crucible of Change and why are we sharing on it? Okay, so let's recap. In the Crucible of Change, we compare the process of melting metal and forming it into a new shape with the process of change that we go through as individuals or as organizations. So the process starts with placing solid pieces of metal that have a consistent shape into a crucible. The crucible is then heated, and after a while the bonds that hold the molecules and keep the shape of the metal break down and it liquefies, and at that point it can be poured into a mold and be made to take on any desired shape. So with that process in mind, let's move forward to discuss the two keys of how to overcome inertia and the resistance to change. So the first key is called hot enough and long enough. So you need heat to melt metal, right? But just because you expose metal to heat doesn't mean that it will melt. It has to be hot enough. And just because you expose metal to heat that is hot enough doesn't mean that it will melt, because you have to expose it to that heat for long enough. So in our own lives, heat shows up in the form of ideas or circumstances that are out of our control. You could consider heat to be a motivational force. Let's take an example. I realize that my trousers are getting a little bit tight and maybe I'm losing a little bit of energy and just not feeling very comfortable in my skin, and that turns out to be because I'm a little bit overweight, and I realize that I need to go on a diet to be able to lose that weight and get back to the way I would like to be. That realization is heat. But at the same moment as I become aware of that need, a lot of objections arise inside me. You see, I quite like the croissant and coffee that I have for breakfast every morning, and I don't want to swap that out for something that I like less. And I'm not quite sure what the best food alternatives are, and I don't really feel like going ahead and researching it. And I'm not maybe sure where to go and get the stuff that I need. And basically it's all just an inconvenience to me. And so possibly, and most often, I'll decide not to make any change. So in other words, the heat wasn't enough. There was heat present, but it wasn't enough heat to generate change. So what do we need to do to raise the heat to make change happen? So I can think of two ways. One would be that maybe I would sit down and consider the disadvantages of the situation I'm in. You know, if I continue to be overweight, I might need to get to a point where I have to buy more clothes. I might lose confidence because I'm not looking good. I might just not have the energy to do the things that I need to do. On the other hand, if I do make the change, all of those things reverse, and I would look good in my clothes, I'd feel confident, I would have the energy that I need to do my work well and perform at my peak. And as I dwell on those things, and as time passes, I might be able to raise the heat and the motivation force inside of me to the point where I make that choice to make a change. So it's not enough to just have heat. It has to be hot enough for long enough. All right, so moving on to key 2. Key 2 is paint a predictable process. So if you look at the process of metal melting, so you start off with a solid piece of metal with a consistent shape. We could call that normal. Then we heat it up until the bonds that hold the molecules together weaken and break, and the metal begins to soften and then melt. That's a state of flux. And then we put it in the mold of the shape we want it to be, and we let it cool, and then once again it's solid and it has a consistent solid shape. And so that's now the new normal, right? So we started with normal, we went into a state of flux, and then we ended up in a new normal. So we had normal and normal. So let's define what normal is. Normal is about predictability. It's about knowing what the rules of a situation are and being able to use them to get what we need. So when we're able to do that, it builds our confidence. Now when change happens, it messes with the predictability of the situation. It lowers our confidence. Another word for lowered confidence is fear. And that's what resistance to change is all about. So you would have noticed that when we are melting metal, we start with metal in a solid or normal shape. After it melts and resets, we end up with metal in a solid and new normal shape. So normal is not the problem. People are happy with the old normal and the new normal because in both cases it's predictable and there are rules and consistency. The problem lies in the middle with the flux. So if we are going to lead change with minimal resistance in ourselves or in organizations, what we need to do is raise the level of predictability in the midst of flux. How do we do that? In order to raise the confidence of people while they're going through change, we have to paint a predictable process for them. So that is key too, paint a predictable process. I want to give you a last thought. Anybody who's ever led change knows that change is never 100% predictable. And I think the US Marines have figured out a great way of navigating the unpredictable. If you think nothing is more unpredictable than war, but the US Marines motto is never leave a man behind. And having that motto in mind, that guiding principle laid down for them in the midst of whatever circumstance they face, they're able to have the confidence to do great things and take great risks, knowing that they will never be left behind no matter what happens. So the two keys were hot enough for long enough and paint a predictable process. Thank you very much for joining me today and listening to this. I hope that you found it useful. If you did, can I ask that you share it with someone that you feel will benefit by it? And remember that if you'd like to see more of these posts, please like this post and also like the My Wealth Guys Facebook page. Thank you for joining us and goodbye. And remember to take it easy out there.